Hello, Petal. How you doing? How have you been? We are at the final chapter, chapter 17 of the Better Mousetrap, J.W. Wells & Co., book 5. We will be continuing on to book 6 in the next couple of days, maybe even tomorrow. We'll have to see how tomorrow goes, though. But this one has been blinding because we've really come into our own with our little conversations in the comments section, and I am here for it. I can't tell you how much I love that. I appreciate all the bings of the notifications bell and the shares and the subscribes and the like buttons. It does really help the channel to keep going, so if you could do that for me, if you genuinely enjoy the chapters, that would be a massive help, and I do appreciate you for it. And as ever, just don't hesitate, just let's keep on with our little chats in the comments section. Let us know how things have been. I really enjoyed the reflection on what's the benefits of the last 4 years, and it really brought a smile to my face. It was lovely, yeah. I enjoyed that. That was really nice. So, what are you doing this weekend? Do you celebrate Easter, or do you not celebrate Easter? Tell me about it. I don't, but I'm happy to have the whole 4-day weekend. Do you take time off over Easter? Is there a national holiday? Or are you just happy to continue as normal? Let us know about it. Let us know about what you do for Easter where you are. But without further ado, it's the final chapter of The Better Mousetrap, J.W. Wells & Co., Book 5 by the amazing Tom Holt, Chapter 17, What Will Be Happening Next. As one door closes, another opens. Thanks to Mr. Aristide's superbly detailed report, the timing was flawless, as was the dead reckoning navigation. Accordingly, Emily was still staring at Honshu under the misapprehension that it was New Zealand's North Island when she felt a tap on her shoulder. "Hello," Frank said. "There you are," she replied, when her heart had stopped trying to hammer its way out of her chest. "I was wondering when you were going to show up." Frank's eyebrows disappeared into his fringe like explorers setting off into the rainforest. "Sorry if I kept you waiting," he replied. "Oh, that's all right. I knew you'd come." "Did you? I mean, that's very—" Emily smiled at him. Behind her head, a million stars twinkled inquisitively. A pretty safe sort of belief, as such things go. I mean, if I'd been wrong, I wouldn't have had to suffer agonies of disappointment for very long. She looked past him, at the mountain range that made up the far wall of the crater she stood in. The first girl on the moon. Well, fine. Strange new worlds are where you find them. Let's go home, please. Frank stood aside so that she could see the door, set into a giant boulder. It was slightly ajar, and yellow light leaked through the opening. Emily took a step towards it, then stopped. "There's just one thing," she said. Frank stopped dead in his tracks. "What?" "That long sort of lacy bit there," she said, pointing at the earth. "That's New Zealand, right? Where you come from?" He followed her pointing finger and shook his head. "No, that's Sumatra, I think. Look, does it really matter? If it's all the same to you, I'd like to get back to a breathable atmosphere." Emily shrugged. "Fine," she said. "I was just taking an interest." "Just to update you," Frank said, as they passed through the door together and came out in Emily's office in the Carringtons' building. "Rosie Tanner's got Amelia Carrington locked up in that doorless cellar place. Dennis Tanner's nipped out to find a chemist's. Rosie's got a couple of nasty burns while she was sorting out Amelia. But apparently, since she's a goblin, a dab of germaline and she'll be right as rain. Colin Gomez," he went on, closing the door and rolling it up, "is staging a rather genteel palace coup with the aim of getting himself crowned senior partner. Oh, and Erskine's all right. I made up a bed for him in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet, with a couple of Amelia's cashmere sweaters to lie on. He's going to sniff out George Sprague for me once he's recovered from turning back into a dog again, so it's all right. I think that covers everything." "Rosie Tanner," Emily said, frowning as she sat down in her old familiar chair. "Oh, right, the goblin woman." Slight double take. "She managed to get the better of Amelia Carrington. How the hell did she manage that?" "You don't want to know," Frank said.
But it worked. Amelia's safely locked up, and we got the coordinates so I could come and fetch you. Ah, and you owe her a favour.
Her old familiar chair. When you live in an office, she had a flat, a tiny little thing huddled in the shadow of an enormous mortgage, like a cottage at the foot of Vesuvius, but it was just somewhere she went to sleep. Your chair gradually becomes the centre of the universe. It's your triangulation point, where you measure all your distances from. It's where you are to be found, unless you have legitimate business that calls you away. Needless to say, it reflects your status as accurately as the shoulders of a soldier's uniform. Emily's chair swiveled and sort of reclined, though you dare not push your luck unless you really wanted to visit the floor. But it was old, tired, having been handed, so to speak, down in a career of inverse promotions, full equity partner to associate partner to senior assistant to junior assistant, and when if Emily ever got promoted, it'd ascend another rung of the ladder and support the weight of a junior assistant until it finally wore out completely and went in the skip. The thing about office chairs is, though, that the more beat up and rickety they become, the more comfortable they grow and the harder they are to leave. The seat moulds itself to the bum, but the brain and heart mould themselves to the chair until it's not quite clear where one ends and the others begin. Yes, Emily said gravely. I guess I do. What did she have in mind?
Well,
said Frank. The dragon stirred. Fluctuations in the dream carried it, like a leaf in a storm. Gusts of memory swept it back into the shared past of old dragon kind. Eddy sent it spiralling sideways into the minds of other dragons as they brooded, sulked, hoped, loved, and regretted eating cheese. A swirl of vicarious pleasure lifted it up, but then it stalled and felt itself hang in empty air as it registered an unfamiliar presence.
You again,
it said. Me again, replied the human female. The dragon registered her properly. Emily Spitzer, dragon slayer, exponent of a necessary function, since dragons hardly ever die of old age or disease, but unless dragons die, the dream would be a straight line rather than a circle.
Hello, Emily Spitzer. Have you come to kill me now?
Sort of, she replied. The dream filled with strange shapes and rare colours.
Sort of,
the dragon repeated. Look, said Emily Spitzer, about this prophecy.
Oh, yes.
You know more about it than I do, obviously, and Amelia Carrington clearly believed in it, or she wouldn't have gone to all that trouble to get rid of me.
Have you been got rid of, then?
Yes, but I came back. Just listen for a moment, will you? The prophecy says that when we fight, I'll win, okay?
Yes. I can show you the place in the dream, if it would help.
No, really, that's fine. Only I was thinking, I don't really want to kill you, you see.
Oh, that would be inconvenient.
The dream flared orange with Emily's irritation. Well, Tav, look, this dream of yours, it's not, well, carved in stone, is it?
Of course not. It exists within the neural pathways of all dragons, comprised of regulated electrical discharges travelling along synaptic...
Oh, be quiet. What I mean is, if we wanted to, we could change it, right? Deep, rather revolting green.
Well, in theory...
Excellent. So, let's fight.
Now you're talking. Just give me a second to wake up and I'll be ready for you.
No, said Emily Spitzer, the dragon slayer. Don't do that. Just tell me if I'm on the right lines, okay? The prophecy says when we fight meaning engage in conflict, yes?
I suppose so,
dreamt the dragon grudgingly. Engage in conflict, right. And in this context, presumably, the ownership of great wealth has to be at stake, yes?
It's what we're all about, yes. Otherwise, how do you keep score?
Exactly, thought Emily Spitzer. Keeping score. Now, I'd like you to concentrate, please. The dragon concentrated, and into the dream came a pair of wooden blocks with holes drilled in them, 2 matchsticks, and a pile of cardboard rectangles with pictures printed on them. Ready to fight?
Always.
Fine. Now then, the name of the game is cribbage.
Just to clarify,
Dennis Tanner said, after a long silence,
you won the new wire-tonga bauxite strike off Amelia Carrington's Super Dragon in a game of cards.
Emily was too tired to speak, so she nodded.
Ah, well,
Dennis said.
It's an approach, I guess. Very eco-friendly and non-violent of you. And you'll probably be getting Christmas cards from Bob Geldof and David Cameron. So, he added wistfully, what are you planning on doing with it now you've...
Already done, Emily yawned. Gave it to your mum. Small token of appreciation.
Oh.
Dennis's face registered no visible emotion whatsoever.
How about the dragon?
He went on, and tired as she was, Emily recognised a changed subject when she heard one. Oh, it's not really such a good idea to leave something like that just wandering about. You know better than anybody what they're capable of. Emily's next yawn registered on seismic instruments all over the world. Gone to Vegas, she mumbled. It reckons gambling's the most fun it's had in years, and what's the point of having money if you don't spend it? Said something about putting together a dream syndicate of all dragons everywhere. Poor buggers, she added. They'll end up losing the scales off their backs. Still, better than her eyelids drooped, and she fell asleep.
She'll be all right,
Dennis said, as Frank half rose from his chair.
Just tired out, that's all. I mean, what with all the dying she's been doing lately, it's hardly surprising.
He fell silent and sat quietly for a while, staring down at his hands. Frank waited for a bit, then said,
The Carrington woman, locked up in the cellars, won't be going anywhere in a hurry.
Yes, but we can't just leave her there. Dennis looked up.
Yes, we bloody well can. Your girlfriend there may suddenly have turned into a dragon hugger, but I prefer my pest control traditional, thanks all the same.
Frank frowned. Isn't Amelia Carrington your goddaughter or something?
What's that got to do with anything?
I just thought that. Frank shrugged.
Forget it, then. But you can't leave her down there. I've been there, remember? So have you.
Fine. Dennis grinned.
We'll kill her then.
You can't do...
Why not? We don't need her for anything anymore. If you don't want anything to do with it, I expect Colin Gomez will help us out. Jump at the chance, probably.
Frank shook his head. Then a smile crept over his face.
Nah, he said. I've got a better idea.
Amelia Carrington woke up. Her first reaction was to grab for a handful of fire, just in case the goblin woman was... No, belay that. She wasn't in her office anymore. In fact, she wasn't in a building of any sort. She was lying on grass. Wet grass. Ugh. Under a cloudless blue sky. Does not compute. She sat up, and in doing so she caught sight of her feet. They were bare, and stuck out from under the hem of a flowing, tie-dyed cheesecloth skirt. A horrible thought struck her. They couldn't have, she thought. The bastards! It was at that point that she became aware that she was not alone. Lying grouped around her on the grass were a number of young men and women. The girls wore caftans, headbands, and big clunky beads. The boys had long hair, beards, and, in the most extreme cases, round rimless spectacles. One of them was strumming a guitar. The funny smell, Amelia realised later, was patchouli oil. They couldn't have, she thought, but they could, and they had. Bastards! Rage flooded into her, and she clenched both hands in the air. True, her real enemies were presumably decades away by now, leaving her Crusoe stranded in the most unforgivingly alien environment known to mankind, so she couldn't very well firebomb them, but... the rage was so strong that it had to be vented somehow. She needed to firebomb somebody or she would burst. She looked around and selected 2 of the hippies at random. After all, she told herself as she squeezed the inert elements out between her fingers, who the hell would miss them? Emil Exhibit lifted his head and stared blearily at her. He'd do for one target, him and that bloody guitarist. She gave the fireballs in her hands a final squeeze for luck, took careful aim and let fly. Later, Amelia figured out that someone, Uncle Dennis most likely, or possibly Colin Gomez, must have put a strong dampening field on her, almost entirely neutralising her magical abilities, releasing 2 glowing blobs of plasma that drifted slowly up into the air, hung a yard or so off the ground, and then popped softly, briefly filling the air with brightly coloured sparks. They swirled for a second or two in the vestigial breeze, glittered, faded, and went out. The bleary-eyed man shook his head, closed his eyes, and lay down again, while a girl next to him giggled and said, "Hey, far out, can you do that again?" In time, of course, the field began to wear off, so that by 1979, Amelia was able to bend spoons, materialise white rabbits out of hats, and do physically impossible things with playing cards, coins, and bits of string. By then, however, she was quite broken in mind and spirit, and had long since given up any thought of taking revenge or trying to regain her lost power. She was last heard of in 2003, standing unsuccessfully as a Liberal Democrat in a council by-election somewhere in Essex. "Oh, go away," she said, and burst into tears. What else? Oh, yes. "And therefore," said Colin Gomez, "in consideration of your dedication and hard work on behalf of the firm over the last 3 years—" "4, actually," Emily, who'd been tapping her foot impatiently, smiled. "And while I think of it, troll's blood." "I beg your pardon." "I absorbed some a while back, so I know what you're really thinking." Mr. Gomez went quite pale. "Oh," he said. "Well, look, do you want to be a partner or not?" Emily's smile broadened until it bore a distinct resemblance to the Tanner family grin. "Yes, please," she said. "Fine. In that case, welcome to—" "And the same to you, too." With knobs on, Emily closed her eyes just briefly, then opened them again. "So that's it, is it? I'm a partner?" "Yes." "Oh," she frowned. "You know, I always thought it'd feel different, somehow. I don't know, something like the troll's blood thing. I expected the world would change." "I see," Mr. Gomez said carefully. "Has it?" "No, but I suppose I had to get here to find that out, didn't I?" Emily shook her head. "Oh, well," she said, "another ambition realised ahead of schedule. True love and a partnership. That just leaves the rest of my life to fill with something. Maybe I can take up gardening." Mr. Gomez was looking at her anxiously, as if waiting for her to pounce. "Really?" he said at last. "Troll's blood?" "Mm-hmm. That troll you sent me to kill." "Long story." "So you can hear?" "Yes." Mr. Gomez nodded slowly 4 times. Then he reached for a piece of paper and took a pen from his top pocket. "It's all right," Emily said, with a sort of exasperated sigh. "I'm not stopping. I resign." The pen made a faint clunking noise as it fell to the desktop. "You're what?" "I quit." Big smile, not even a faint trace of a grin in it. "I wanted to be made a partner just because, well, because it was there, I guess. But actually being one—" She pursed her lips to hold in a giggle. "No offence," she said, "but I don't think so." "Oh." Mr. Gomez gazed at her, or so she'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. "Why ever not?" "Because," Emily replied sweetly, "worst case scenario, I'd turn into Amelia Carrington. Best case scenario, I'd turn into you." And in either case," she went on, "I think I'd rather be eaten alive by rats, but that's just me, I'm afraid. Not a team player after all. No, I'm thinking of turning freelance, and anyhow, I've gone off killing dragons. Not that there'll be much call for that soon, if they've rarely discovered gambling. I have an idea that a few weeks of internet blackjack will do what generations of hairy men with swords could never quite manage. And there's progress for you. Anyway, I'm out of here." She sighed and gave Mr. Gomez a friendly smile. "Before I go, I'd like to say how much I've enjoyed working with you.
Oh, well, and the same.
But I promised my mother I'd tell the truth, so I can't. Never mind. Emily stood up. I'd better go, she said. Frank's waiting for me in reception. We're going to find his Mr. Sprague and then have lunch. You know, I'm quite sure you'll make a really good senior partner, Mr. Gomez. You've got all Amelia Carrington's stupidity and none of her intelligence. I won't bother cleaning my desk, she said. There's nothing there I actually want any more. Goodbye. She was halfway to the door when Colin said,
I'm sorry you're leaving. We shall miss you.
The odd thing was that he said it twice, simultaneously, or at least that was how Emily heard it. She stopped and looked back. Really?
Oh, yes,
Colin said. He went on.
You were always a pleasure to work with and highly conscientious, and I think you'd have had a great future in the profession.
Or rather, he went on,
you earned us a shitload of money, did all the rotten jobs, never seemed to notice that we were paying you peanuts. Still, you're only a woman. You'd have left sooner or later to have babies, and I could replace you like that, so what the hell?
Emily nodded gravely. Thank you, she said, and left the room. It took Erskine less than 10 minutes to find Mr. Sprague. He was in a matchbox in a file in a locked filing cabinet in the junk furniture collection in the third-floor back office where all the old manual typewriters went to die. Fortunately, Emily knew how to unpack him, and soon she had him back to his normal size without even waking him up.
Can you make him a few inches taller? Frank asked. Only he's been put through a nasty ordeal on my account, and I think he deserves some sort of thank-you present.
Could do, Emily replied, but then his trousers would all be too short. Frank shrugged.
I guess,
he said. They took him back to his office through the door and left him in his chair, still peacefully sleeping, while Erskine skipped around their heels, whacking his tail. Then they went back through the wall. Where are we? Emily asked. The door had opened out of the side of a rusty corrugated iron shack under a clear blue sky. An empty road stretched out as far as the eye could see in both directions, and in the distance a purple haze masked the peaks of improbably beautiful mountains.
My favourite place to eat, Frank said. I can particularly recommend the egg and bacon rolls. Actually, it's all there is. Come on.
They walked around the front of the shack, where a middle-aged man in a filthy white apron was prodding slices of bacon on a greasy range.
Good day, Frank, he said. You've been a stranger. Usual?
Frank nodded.
And 2 teas. Coming up.
The man noticed Emily and frowned slightly.
Who's he? Her name's Emily. She's English. Oh.
They took their rolls and their styrofoam cups over to the roadside, where there was a handy anthill to sit on. Far away in the distance, a huge, long lorry shimmered into view through the heat haze.
Actually, Frank said, you've been here before.
Emily looked blank. Have I? Frank nodded and pointed at the ground.
Down there somewhere. We're directly above the new Waitumba bauxite strike, you know, the one you gave to Mr. Tanner's mum.
He sighed.
Won't be long now before all this is spoil heaps and loading yards, he said. I thought you might like to see it before it gets trashed. I used to come here a lot at one time.
Emily stared at him. Really? Why?
Because if I set out really early in the morning, I could walk here from home by noon. It was something to do, and it got me out the house. I didn't like it very much, you see.
Suddenly he grinned.
On balance, I think it'll be a good thing, he said. Talking to you, it won't matter that I can't find the right words to explain what I mean. You'll know anyway.
Emily nodded slowly and cleared her mouth of a rather chewy bit of fried egg. You think so? She said. Someone else might reckon it'd make any sort of relationship impossible.
I've been thinking about that, Frank said. But what the hell? If ever I feel the need to lie to you, I can always put it in writing.
But then I'd know.
He shrugged. Quite, he said. Saves time, that's all.
He broke off a corner of his roll and threw it to Erskine, who sniffed at it and backed away.
Really? He said. I only brought you here because it's lunchtime, and I like Herman's egg and bacon rolls, or I used to anyway.
he added, as Erskine scuffed up a small hole with his paws and buried the roll fragment in it.
Also, there's this general sense I've got of being at the beginning of the rest of our lives. Seems as good a place to start as any. Did you mean what you said earlier, by the way? About going freelance, I mean?
Emily nodded absently. Probably. I don't want to think about work just now. Let's go somewhere with the beach and have ice cream.
Good idea,
Frank said.
I'll just get the
door he was about to say, but as he opened his mouth he caught sight of two figures walking along the road. There was nothing particularly unusual about them, if you ignored context. One of them was a boy, about 15, tall, fair, thin, unfinished looking, with a small nose and big ears. The other was a girl, about the same age but short and thin, with dark hair. Both of them were in some kind of school uniform, with their shirt tails hanging out and their ties wrenched sideways, and the girl was reaming dirt from under her fingernails with the cap of a biro. She looked up, caught his eye, and said, "Hello, Frank." He stared back at her for 3 seconds, vaguely aware of Emily's voice saying, "Somebody you know?" The boy looked at him too, and smiled vaguely.
It's you.
"Hello, Frank," the boy replied.
And this must be Emily. Hello.
For some reason that made Emily feel nervous. "Frank," she said, "who are—"
What?
Frank seemed to wake up.
Oh, right, yes. This is Emily Spitzer, where...
He paused and went slightly pink.
Emily, he went on, meet Paul and Sophie Carpenter, my mum and dad.
At that moment, for some reason, it occurred to Emily to look round. She saw the egg and bacon roll man, Herman or whatever his name was, apparently frozen in the act of breaking an egg into his frying pan. A few feet away from him, a butterfly hung motionless in the still air.
So,
Frank said, and he felt as though he was trying to hammer the words into a crack in solid rock with his bare hands.
What are you two doing here?
The girls scowled. Not at anything in particular, just a generalised expression of dissatisfaction. "We came to see you," the boy said. "How's everything, by the way?"
Oh, fine.
"You found true love, then?"
Yep.
"That's good. Your mother was saying only the other day, it's about time young Frank found true—" "You've got to give it back," the girl interrupted. Before he said, "Give what back?" Frank already knew the answer. "The portable door, of course," the girl said. "You shouldn't have taken it. It's dangerous." "It's our fault, really," the boy said. "We shouldn't have left it behind, only we didn't have a choice. When we went away, you see, it closed and we were on the other side. Anyhow, we're not blaming you, but your mother's right, I'm afraid. You can't keep it."
Ah,
Frank said, as Emily hissed loudly.
"That's your mother?"
"Yes," the girl said, and if there was a hint of "he's mine, you can't have him" in her voice, Emily could only deduce it in the normal way, rather than hear the actual words. Whoever or whatever these two were, Charles' blood didn't seem to have any effect. But that as it might be, she thought. Although it was utterly true that she didn't just want Frank because of the door and its endless possibilities, there was no way she was going to let him give it up without a fight. She took a deep breath, looked at the girl squarely in the eye and said, "Later, of course." She kept on asking herself over and over again, why? Just kidding herself, of course. She knew perfectly well why. "Go on, Frank," she said. "You'd better do as they say." Frank shrugged.
"Oh, all right then,"
he said, and he held out the little cardboard tube. The girl snatched it out of his hand, and it went somewhere. "Thanks, son," the boy said, with maybe a trace of guilt in his voice. "Sorry, but you know it makes—" "And the other one," the girl interrupted. Frank nodded, dug in his jacket pocket, and produced another cardboard tube. The girl took that one as well. This time Emily watched closely, but she still failed to see where it went. "You'll be better off without it, I promise you," the boy went on sadly. "I know I am, after all. How long's it been now?" "Oh yes, silly question, but you know what I mean. It's been ages, and I haven't missed it at all. Never given it a second thought, in fact," he added. And although the troll's blood wasn't working, Emily didn't need it to hear what he really wanted to say. And anyway, you're young, you've got your whole life in front of... And the other one. This time Frank couldn't help pulling a face.
Oh, for pity's sake, Mum.
Give it here, now. Very slowly and reluctantly, Frank knelt down, rolled up his trouser leg, and removed a cardboard tube from inside his left sock. He parted with it so reluctantly that Emily reckoned it must have taken the skin off his fingertips.
There, he said, that's the lot. Promise.
The girl nodded grimly. The boy gave Frank a faint, weak smile, as if to say, I'm proud of you, son, but we both know what my opinion's worth. The girl turned her head away and said, Come on, Paul, we've got a lot to do. Goodbye, Frank, look after yourself. Then she gave Emily a long stare, took 3 paces forward, and vanished. A moment later, her voice called out, Here, boy! And Erskine, who'd been curled up fast asleep beside the egg and bacon roll man's shack, jumped up, sniffed the air, trotted after her with his tail wagging and disappeared too.
Bye, Mum,
Frank said. The boy looked as though he was about to follow. Then he stopped and turned back. You could always come with us. You know, I mean, yes, we've had our differences and...
Thanks, Dad, but no.
Oh. A tiny pinpoint of despair, small and bright as a distant star, glowed briefly in the boy's eyes. And then he shrugged.
Well, he said, if ever you change your mind, you know where we are.
Frank nodded, and nothing. The boy forced his mouth into a 2-dimensional smile, then turned and looked at Emily.
Look after him for me, will you? It's his mother, you see. They never really...
He shrugged, turned away, turned back again.
Nearly forgot, he said. There's $40 million in your name in the First State Bank of Wisconsin. Just a little something left over from the old days. No use to me anymore. But for God's sake, don't tell your mum, all right?
Frank nodded.
Thanks, Dad. That's all right. Sorry about the doors. Forget it. Bye, Dad.
Bye, Frank, the boy said. Then he too walked 3 paces forward and disappeared. Behind her, Emily heard the sizzle of an egg landing in hot oil. She looked at Frank, who shook his head slowly.
My parents, he said. Sorry about that.
It's all right. I understand. I know you must be feeling really upset right now, but later we'll talk about it, and maybe it won't seem so bad, was what Emily fully intended to say, but there was some sort of glitch in the translation, and what actually came out of her mouth was $40 million.
Yep,
Frank said, then added,
better than a kick in the head, I suppose.
Then quite suddenly he smiled broadly.
Considerably better than a kick in the head, actually.
No door, though, Emily pointed out. True. Frank was grinning so broadly it was a wonder that his head didn't fall off.
But what the hell? Emily?
Yes?
What would you do if you suddenly came into $40 million?
Emily thought for a moment. I think I'd find a dragon who had $80 million and challenge it to a game of gin rummy, she said. And then I'd find another dragon with $240 million and see if it fancied playing whist. And then I'd find 2 more dragons worth a total of $480 million. And you do know how to play bridge, don't you? Frank smiled at her. With or without a door, he had only one life, and without a purpose, existence is meaningless. But with a purpose...
No, he said. But I'm sure you can teach me.
Oh, I like that ending. That was awesome. But Paul and Sophie Carpenter, I never got the whole, why they were kids thing. Do you have any theories of why that would be? Maybe? Maybe. What's the next one? Oh, may contain traces of magic. Sorry, I was like, which done one? Oh, goodness, right, okay, I'll try and... I'm all giddy because of the ending. You know, it's like, even though you know what's coming, this is a wonderful thing about Tom Holt. You can keep reading and reading and reading, and you always find something different, and it always seems new, but it always seems so familiar, you know. But yes, the next one may contain traces of magic, and that's J.W. Wells and Co. Book 6. So hopefully we'll get to start that in a maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday. We shall see. How are you doing, though? Did you enjoy that one? Was it good? You have a good time with it? Are you looking forward to the next one? You gonna come along for the ride, do you think? I think it'll be splendid. We're having such a good time. But I'll stop whiffling now. I'm very grateful that you're here. If you can just do the bing bing thing. I like that. If you can just do the bing bing thing for me. That was rather jolly. But if you could hit the notifications bell if you haven't already, if you do want to share, please do. Subscribe if you haven't, and if you'd like to. And if you did enjoy this one, please hit that like button, because it just means the world. And of course, as always, feel free to just comment, chat on, have a little conversation. I love seeing it, and thank you very, very much. I appreciate each and every one of you. Happy face. So I'm going to go and have a rest now, and then I shall see you the next time. But most importantly of all, take it easy, stay safe, and I'll see you soon, Petal. Me. No, that doesn't really work, does it? We need a tune. See you soon.